I ain't worried about my lifestyle. I'm the new thing with a bright smile. Catch me when I'm out in public. Always show them love and I know they love it. Give you a reason to love me this season. I'm taking my chances. I hope it enhances my...
Welcome to Romera Records Podcast. Today we have on...
Victor Sawyer from the Lucky 7 Brass Band.
Awesome. How's it going, Victor?
It's good.
Good.
Feeling good.
So you're on here because Luis was a advocate of what you do. You're also in the same band, so that kind of helps. Yeah. So word. Okay, yeah. My bad. I'm sorry. So what actually brought you into the music industry, and how'd you get to where you are? Truly.
Yeah. I think what got me into music was just high school, middle school band. What actually got me into the industry, though, was, when it came time to pick a major, music was what I was good at. And I think being a young person who has, like, an identifiable skill was really awesome. I didn't realize how unique that was. A lot of people don't have that. So then as soon as I got to undergrad, one of my professors, I guess a trombone player for a salsa band, had quit, or they were trying to make a salsa band. But, my professor was like, hey, we're doing a salsa band. Do you think you can hang? And I was like, yeah, sure. So that was actually my first paid series of gigs. And then from there, I joined a few more bands, moved to New York and came back. And it was really when I came back that career really took off. And at that point, it was just, that was my skill set. That's what I was good at. So I wanted to use it. So I just got out in Memphis and kept gigging. I'm a freelancer. So it's cool to be a freelancer because you end up meeting a lot of different people, a lot of different bands, playing in a lot of different venues. And I think because of that, you end up having access to a lot of different kinds of work, whether it be studio sessions, touring, or whatever. So that's kind of where I am as a musician.
Oh, okay. So the salsa band, that's pretty interesting. I've never known anybody to be great at salsa stuff. So how'd you, is that something that's a lot different than, I guess, any other type of music, or is it just easy to kind of roll into salsa?
Yeah, I think every kind of music has its own idiosyncrasies. I think that as Americans or North Americans, people from the USA, we don't use those rhythms and that aesthetic as much. Like going from grunge to pop. Yeah, there's definitely a difference, but at least that's sort of a native music. The Afro-Cuban music that is really all across South America, number one, a misconception about it is that it's sort of this homogeneous sound, but there are regional differences. There's a lot of different sort of rhythmic patterns. I think the difference between American popular music and Afro-Cuban music is the attention to detail in the rhythms. So yeah, there are definitely some considerations. There's some stylistic things, but once again, as a freelancer, I'm sort of tasked with exploring music, and I've always liked that music. So even now, I just played a salsa band gig, and it's not like I have to dive in and relearn this style because I like it a lot, and I've always liked it.
So did you teach yourself, or did you learn from somebody?
How to play the kind of music?
Yeah.
Just learning on the bandstand. I think it's really helpful being a college student. One thing that college does is it trains you, if you absorb it right, how to be a sort of a digital crate digger. So always looking for new music, always trying to sound better for any situation. So it just sort of came naturally. I just got some records. I went and asked my professor. I was like, hey, trying to get into this salsa band music. I really need to be good. And that led to Willie Colon, who was one of the first immigrants to the United States, I believe in the 40s or 50s, when there was a massive Puerto Rican, Cuban migration to North America. So Dizzy Gillespie, the famous trumpet player, he actually opened the door for a lot of Afro-Cuban music to make its way into the American popular music because these people came up and they were in Brooklyn. New Yorican? That's the phrase for Puerto Ricans that moved up to New York. And so Willie Colon actually was a trombone player. So the trombone is actually one of the founding instruments of a lot of what American Afro-Cuban music sounds like.
Yeah. I actually have so I do a lot of my my beat making with native instruments. I use the Contact Library, and they've got like a Cuban, I guess, like pack or whatever presets. And it's just like straight trumpets and stuff like that. It sounds so good though. Yeah. And then with all their drums and everything, I'm just like, man, Cuban music, it just sounds like fun music. It just sounds like something live and something exciting, like an event's going on. And it's crazy listening to the differences in music because like they have their own like tone to them. And I was going to school at Full Sail University online, and when I was learning about the piano, like I knew I can do things that sound good, but I didn't know like the keys. Like I didn't know how like chords and stuff like that actually mesh together. And so when I learned about like majors and minors, I learned that majors are supposed to be like happy songs, and like minors are more like a solemn, like really dark tone and stuff like that. And I was like, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. The cool thing about minor, especially today, is you're really right. Where major has always been associated with sort of happy keys, and minor has always been associated with more sad or dark or things like that. What's so interesting about that is modern music, modern pop music, actually utilizes minor keys a lot. When you actually go listen to a lot of modern pop music, a lot of it is minor, even if it's sort of happy or pop dancey music. And I read an article recently about how the pop music of today really reflects a lot of anxiety amongst young people, a lot of angst. And so, back then you might be like, well, why are all these young people putting out this sad music? But it's like, well, it's kind of a reflection of the time. So there's really this sort of like almost nihilistic juxtaposition of like, well, I'm enjoying my life. Like I'm having a good time. I'm out. I want to dance. But also this music is sort of a panacea, right? Is that how you say that word?
I guess
Anyway,
so.
it's medicine. Sort of soothe the spirit with all the anxiety, social media, drugs, addiction that go along with the modern world. So it's surprising to me how much minor there is in music, especially rap and hip hop.
Yeah.
It was like, who was the guy, Lil Uzi Vert? When he came out with his rap, it was in a major key, and it was like jarring almost to hear rap and stuff in a major key.
Yeah. I actually use a lot of majors when I make stuff because it's just what I'm like used to, I guess, because I'm used to just hitting the white keys. So I'm just like, all right, this is where it's at. And then when I start doing all the minors with all the black keys, I'm like, this is a little different. I just that's just how I associate them. That's not what they are. It's just black keys and white keys, but that's just how I associate those two together. But I don't know, like when you can just take different, I guess, moods and tones to different songs and then just gel them together. That's pretty interesting. So what else, as far as like sounds, can you do with different instruments? Like, so you might have like an instrument that is mainly used for a certain like genre of music. Do you like swap those up?
Yeah, I definitely do. And that goes back to the democratization of music these days, if you go back, gosh, even to the 90s, really, and maybe the early 2000s, music was still very much regional, So as far as instruments, I'll take one digital instrument, actually, for an example. So there's sort of that high-pitched sort of synth sort of sound.
Yeah.
The best example, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, in that Snoop Dogg song. I think. Yeah. And so that's really a sound that's associated with West Coast rap. So it's still cool how you have these sort of regional markers. Maybe the people making music now don't think of it as much, but even when you listen to Kendrick Lamar, Dr. Dre's album, Compton, you hear those sounds that really NWA, Snoop Dogg sort of pioneered way back in the day. But now you just see it getting mixed up and everything. I teach at Stax Music Academy, and we were talking about disco. We were talking about Get Up Off That Thing, James Brown, right? So that's all acoustic instruments, right?
Okay.
And so we talked about how that disco sound, it's James Brown's pre-disco, where like you can hear some of the beginnings of disco. James Brown is really not talked about as much as he should, is really the impetus for a lot of different kinds of music, including hip hop, breakdance hip hop. But I think about Billie Eilish, right?
Okay.
So that disco sound, nobody's out here discoing anymore in modern times.
Yeah.
But when you listen to Bad Guy, that's really close to a disco beat because it has that and that's straight disco. Disco went into techno, and that beat's been there for a while, but that hi-hat that's just sort of on that upbeat, that's a thing. So yeah, I think people are mixing it around. I'm mixing around Lucky 7 Brass Band. Of course, we're playing music that is not meant to be played on horns. Like we're playing the guitar parts, the bass parts, the vocal parts, the backgrounds. We're playing all of it, and it's just 5 horns and electric bass. So yeah, I think we're in a different time now where people's aural palette is a little more diverse because there's just so much music out there.
There is.
That I think humans now, especially in pop music, can tolerate a lot of sounds that wouldn't have been really tolerated back in the 60s. I mean, when the synths came out, when modern pop artists, well, modern for the late 60s and 70s, man, people were like, we don't like these sounds. People were like, what are you doing? Well, because it was people like Herbie Hancock. It was people like Quincy Jones who have this long career of acoustic, hardcore sort of music.
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden it's like, well, why are they embracing these new sounds? You know, it was as monumental as when Bob Dylan went electric, you know, changed the game.
So when you have music that is, I guess, transitioning, when you see that kind of transition, do you feel like everybody has to adapt, or do you feel like some people need to like, you know, stay what they're doing? Because it's, I think about that because Eminem just put out a new album.
Okay.
And Eminem's music have you listened to his old stuff compared to his new stuff?
Oh yeah, that's my generation.
Oh
yeah,
my God.
I remember when it dropped.
Jeez,
That
like
very first album.
he's changed to the time so much, but like he's still Eminem though.
Yeah.
And it's some of his stuff, like I just don't like it because I'm just so used to like older Eminem, like what's it called, Curtain Call and all his other older albums. Like I love that Eminem, but when he like tries to make music to like fit the culture now, I'm just like, I don't know. Stay the old Eminem. So what do you think about that?
Well, definitely in hip hop culture, I noticed it a lot more in hip hop because hip hop, you know, dance music, most pop music is dance music, or, you know, it comes from a dance background. And one of the things about dance music is the tempo. So, you know, you have sort of rap that's, let's see, breakdance, doom, 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 and that's that 80s sound. But then all of a sudden, you get to the 90s, and it slows down a bit. Someone with name Ice Cube. I didn't say the N word. I'm trying to. So the tempo's different, and then you keep going, and the tempo keeps changing around. So as far as how that relates to hip hop is when the beat changes and the tempo changes, there are certain ways of rapping that don't necessarily lend themselves to those tempos and things like that. So right now, you know, a lot of things are that triplet bass sort of rapping, like. And so you hear old rappers who are used to the older tempo, maybe like a Q-Tip, who Q-Tip is really amazing for staying pretty true to where he came from with that sort of New York sound with the jazzy stuff. Who was on it? I'm not going to name this rapper because I really like him, but they tried to do the triplet thing, and they're not from the triplet thing time. And the flow was not smooth. It just didn't feel right. You know, but it's cool because as an artist, you know, you're allowed to transition and things like that. You know, Andre 3000 recently said, I'm not making music for a while. I'm not putting it out for a while because of all the scrutiny. And I imagine that must be really difficult and pressuring. Even as a local musician, mostly at a local level, I feel that pressure. Why don't you do this? You should do that. I don't know. You did this new thing, da-da-da-da-da. I can't imagine being on an international level and having to deal with that level of scrutiny whenever you want to do something a little artistically different.
Yeah, that pressure has got to be insane on them, and plus just putting out the amount of music. Because like, I would say music probably changed maybe 10 years ago as far as like album lengths. Because like albums started getting shorter and shorter. Like people are putting out, I want to say like 12-song albums. I think Bruno Mars did that. His was it 24 Karat? Is that the name of the album?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So that album, I think, was only like 12 songs long. Yeah. But, I mean, everybody knew most of the songs because they were all hits.
They came out as singles,
Yeah, but I think I saw an interview with 50 Cent, and he was talking about, he was like, man, I don't see how people are putting out these albums nowadays. He's like, back when I was doing music and doing great, it was 18-song albums. Yeah. And that was like the standard was to do that many. And then I was also thinking about, I was listening to the Temptations yesterday because I was telling I had Amber Russell on yesterday, and I was telling her, I was like, music used to be like a minute intro of just like a beat build up, and then you start adding all your instruments, and then you have the singer come in, and then they might have like an interlude in between there, and then you have the singer like finish out, and then you have like maybe a little outro, something like that. But now it's just like short intro, get the song done, and then that's it. It's like people they're not enjoying the music anymore. It's like, hey, let's just let's chop through this and like have a 2-minute song or something like that.
I don't know. That's not really how I feel about it. And, but I was actually thinking about this just the other day. And you have artists like Drake and Future, right? So Future is notorious for just dropping hundreds of songs in a really short amount of time.
Yeah.
But they're really just taking advantage of a digital system. So some people would say, oh, people just have less patience, their attention spans are shorter. And yeah, but no, I mean, I would also say the amount of content, it's just overwhelming. It's hard to stick to one thing because there's no more gatekeepers. Genre is really getting blurred a lot. And so to sift through all that music, yeah, of course, because there's so much to get through. I think of it less as an attention span thing and more like I know when I really, really like something. Like you feel it and you know.
Yeah.
So then you turn on a new song and it's like, it's cool. It's a good song, but like it's not hitting you in the gut.
Yeah.
There's so much music out there. It's like, well, I can't really give this the time of day. And you think back to older times and the pace of life, it was slower just because it had to be. We didn't have the technology to make it as fast. Everything, there were gatekeepers, so everything wasn't going to make it to your ears anyway. Also, you were limited by your network. So here's an example for me. I didn't know about the Beatles or Led Zeppelin until I met somebody who knew the Beatles or Led Zeppelin. Because I'm that interesting age. I was born in '87, so I'm at that age where the first like 16 to 20 years of my life was the first like 10 or 11, no internet. Like it wasn't a thing. Then I had this teenage time when it was the shitty version of the internet with the disc and everything. And then finally, not until I'm 22, 23, is like smartphones are ubiquitous and all that stuff.
Yeah.
On the single thing, check this out. Are you ready for this? All right. So, yeah, everybody's like, oh my gosh, everybody's just putting these short singles out. But what's crazy about it is we tend to think of that era from like the late 60s, 70s up to like the 90s is like the time for modern pop music. But that was actually the anomaly. Like it was mostly a single culture. Like almost singles were the norm for most of human history, actually, when it comes to music. Like there weren't any albums really at all, Even going back to classical composers, they're dropping one symphony at a time. They're dropping that.
True.
You look back to the Motown thing and it's all singles. They're dropping singles, partly because of the limitation of technology. So you have these artists who are putting out a single here, single there. Technology gets better. Well, now we can do a EP, so an extended play RPM record. So now we'll put like 3 or 4 singles.
Yeah.
Now we have the extended play. So I think the artists end up getting more bloated. But I feel like it's actually reverting to the time before CDs where it's like, no, it's just a singles-based culture. And then you put out the collection like Drake did with Scorpion. That was beautiful the way he did that.
Oh, like the rap and then the R&B?
Yeah, he dropped so many singles. He dropped like how many singles off that album? Like 4 or 5?
Yeah, it had been.
So, and then what was cool time-wise is he wrote those singles out for a long time. And right when you were starting to forget about some Drake, boom, Scorpion's dropped. And now it's those singles plus 20 other songs.
Well, you were talking about like the Motown and having like the Temptations, and so when I just pulled up my Google Play and just trying to look up Temptations music, I was like, I can't name you a single album by the Temptations, but I know their songs. I was like, dang, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And then also, but I feel like rock. I know some rock songs, but people will name like albums by rock, like AC/DC and Metallica and stuff like that. People will name those albums, but I feel like most other genres like pop music and stuff like that, people will name like the songs. They don't really name the albums, except Adele. She did a great job with like, she named the album her age, like 19, 20, or 21 or whatever she named them. But that was pretty interesting. I thought that was cool because it put an attachment to that album and like in age. So it made it more memorable. And Kendrick did something like that. He named it.
Albums.
Yeah, he named it like Untitled or something like that.
Untitled, Unmastered.
Yeah, and I was like, that is. I think people don't take advantage of an album name or a song title because you can make people remember your music based off the title.
I think part of it just goes to the culture you end up creating music in. I think when you have a lot of DIY musicians which a lot of hip hop artists were formed. I mean, hip hop artists was one of the most DIY musics of the modern era, right?
Yeah.
Dudes in their bedroom.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? People selling their mixtapes on the street or whatever.
Gas stations.
Yeah, I agree with you too. Those albums. But the risk with an album is that to drop an album that's like top to bottom pretty good, that's a task.
It is.
That's a task. And I mean, rock music sort of came in at that time period, like the late 60s, where the technology, at that point you could have a long playing record where how many tracks? Probably get like 5 to 10 tracks on a record, like a physical record. So they can start putting out albums now because the technology allows them to. The CDs, of course. I mean, so rock music really was one of the first genres, I think, from my knowledge of music history, that really embraced that sort of album vibe, and then funk music and things like that. It sort of became all about the album. I think one of the key differences with rock is that rock wasn't necessarily a dance music by the time it got to what we think of as rock now. When people talk about rock and roll, they're not really thinking about Sister, Rosetta Thorpe. They're probably not thinking about Chuck Berry and things like that. Probably talking more Led Zeppelin style rock, Jimi Hendrix style rock.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're 100% right. They took care of those things, but also I think it's because the medium, the aesthetic of the music wasn't about dancing. So it was almost, you actually didn't have to put out as many singles. You didn't have to breadcrumb it as much, because if you're dance-oriented music, you got to be putting out music for people to dance to on a regular basis, as opposed to being like, this is my complete artistic statement. I'm releasing it all at once, and then we're going to tour for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the ability, like you were talking about earlier, how technology has changed it, the ability to transfer files and like send it to people. So, I mean, back in the day, they weren't able to just, hey, I'm gonna record at home and I'm gonna send y'all my vocals and stuff like that. Everybody had to be in the studio. You had, people were probably making it like an event and they're bringing drinks and food, and it was like an all day thing. But you don't have to do that anymore. You can, I've got all my stuff here and I'm all set up. I've got my microphone, I got my amps and my audio interface, and I'm good and everything's done. But back then they didn't have the ability to do that.
No, you had to get together. It had to be a team of people. And, having a team now is way different. But yeah, I agree with you where it's so easy to get your music refined or judged fairly quickly. You can send it, you can chop it up fairly quickly because we don't have to rely on tape anymore.
Yeah.
So you can actually just be like, I don't like that anymore. It's done. Let's just do that. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
We need the background vocals again. We'll just drop them in. I remember, what's that? I'll never forget the scene in, was it Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story with Will Ferrell?
Oh, I don't think I've seen that actually.
I
know the movie you're talking about, but I haven't seen it.
Well, there's one scene in there that's so telling of the time period where, it's a mockumentary, so they act like he's the Beatles at one point. And he has the full orchestra, cowbells, kazoos, and they're all in the studio. And so, once again, going back to teaching or whatever, we were talking about Stax, the record label. We were talking about Motown, the record label. We were talking about the houses that they actually did that. And my students, it wasn't like they were shocked. Like they know generally, but we actually talked about, the physical space of a building. Oh yeah, we were in the museum and one of the students said, well, why is the floor so sloped? Why is this? It was like, well, actually, this is the room that cut a lot of things. One, it's big. The ceilings are really high. The movie theater sloped floor allows the sound to travel in a different way. You can get different effects but placement. But I was like, it literally was physical placement. It was multiple. It was everybody in the room at the same time. They were like, well, why didn't they just multi-track it? I was like, it didn't exist. It wasn't a thing.
That's hilarious.
Because I was like, that's why you see take 1, take 2 on records. I was like, it's not like, oh, here's the scratch roll. It's like, no, that is literally a full run of crazy. This song. And it just was like, wait, what a minute. I think for me it's different because I went to music school for jazz and classical music, which those styles of music are still very much associated with in-person interaction. To play orchestral music, you gotta have an orchestra. To play jazz music, you at least need like 2 to 5 other people. So it's definitely changed my. I find that I don't think of it like a studio person. Recording music, being in the studio is probably one of my least favorite aspects of music. Yeah, I'm not particularly fond of it. I don't mind coming in and knock it out at recording, but like all day sessions or just actually sitting at the computer and working with the levels and stuff like that, man, that's my least favorite part of music.
I actually really like it just because it's like it's like science. It's like an experiment. So I don't know. I really like that part of it.
A lot of people do.
Gosh, what was I going to ask you about? It was something about a specific Childish Gambino. So
yeah.
have you? I can't think of the guy's name, but it's
Glover?
No, it's a white guy who is like Swedish, I think.
Oh, Max Martin.
So he's worked with Gambino on his last album.
Okay.
And he worked on that Black Panther.
Yeah.
That Black Panther soundtrack.
Oh, okay.
And that dude. So he's like, yeah, I never really worked with hip hop or any type of like that kind of music until he started working with Childish Gambino, and it was just amazing how how he transitioned. So that dude he's a composer.
Yeah.
Like you can see him like he's in the studio and he's literally like directing the entire orchestra on the Black Panther soundtrack. Yeah. I'm just like, that is the geniusness and creativity behind a person who hadn't even worked with the genre and was doing like orchestral type music, and then was able to transition to Childish Gambino's last album, which blew a lot of people's minds because they were so used to, which Gambino had like a real like hip hop type flow to his older albums. Yeah. And then he came out with, he also had his mixtapes where he was taking like, he took some like good Southern, like beats and whatnot, and then he had his last album, which was phenomenal with the singing and all the different like effects that he used with that. So, do you think that is what more genres need? Is that mixture? Because I feel like propelling people to different, just for the sake, I love hearing different. Like I love hearing change. So I like the chaos in music. I don't like for things to stay the same. Do you think that being able to change and to be able to create new things and like bringing people from other genres, just like look at Old Town Road, how you had Billy Ray Cyrus and Lil Nas X making a country rap, and it went number one. I think it was like the number one seller for months. I don't know how long, but do you think that's the new thing to do?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like more accelerated now. I think it's a little more confusing because even when you go look at music history, it's like there are certain time periods, like a certain collection of years where it's very identifiable. This is now this genre. Yeah. But going back to the disco thing, it's like it took a while for it to sound like this is disco. Yeah. This is reggae. This is Atlanta rap. Yeah. I think it was a lot easier regionally, and now it's just more people based. It's kind of interesting how it's almost like music is just this real big communal thing. And also it wasn't Max Martin. I want to make sure Max Martin is the guy that did Britney Spears and NSYNC and all them. Oh, okay. But there's one of my favorite composers is this person, Hungarian, yeah, Bela Bartok. And he was one of the first ethnomusicologists. So there's a time period in classical music where all of a sudden, because of technology, once again, people could travel to these more remote regions, especially a lot of European composers, especially Central Europe, Eastern Europe too, and they could actually record the folk song sounds. And so Bartok recorded those sounds. And to your point, guess what he did? He took those very traditional folk songs, the sensibilities, but he was also so advanced music theory. So he blended it together. Was it a true new genre? No, but it was definitely a new sort of sound. The idea of using those kind of folk songs. So when it comes to modern music, I think it's just happening. I think it happens a lot more organically because even the way you and me have been talking, the amount of genres that we've spanned talking about, like clearly our knowledge of these multiple genres is enough that we could utilize some elements of it. Yeah. And I think people didn't have the means to do that. No. It's like there are two people, Franz Liszt and Jimi Hendrix. So Liszt was like a rock star in the classical world at his time. If you read biographies, like he would show up places and people were like fainting. They're like, he had huge hands. He had enough. His hand reach was enough that I think he could play a tenth on the piano, which is nuts because it's like C to E, but not but like
That's wild.
And so people couldn't play his music because it was written for him by him.
Yeah.
And so people just couldn't do it. And then so that's one example. But then you look at Jimi Hendrix and imagine. It's kind of like what happened to Eric Clapton. You know, the famous story with Eric Clapton where they invite Jimmy to the UK. He's still not popular in the United States, so somebody's like, you gotta come to the UK where all the sort of new rocking, like Cream, the Beatles, all these people, and he plays, and once again, no one had ever heard anybody like that play, and I think it's kind of a cool thing. It's like, it's an either or thing, but new sounds, you didn't get to hear new sounds until you heard it either in person or somebody showed you. So you didn't even have the opportunity to integrate it into your playing until you heard it. Chuck Berry was the same when he hit him with the distorted guitar, which happened because literally his tube amp broke. So the story of distorted guitar is that the tube amp would break, so there was no pedals, and you had to break the tubes in the back a little bit, and it distorted the sound of the guitar. So people all of a sudden, and it happened, they were like driving to the next gig and the amp slapped on something and they were like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? He's like, I got to play the show. And so after people heard it, you know, you heard it through the grapevine, you're like, man, I heard this one guy, he's doing something different with the guitar. But you couldn't hear it until you heard it. And so people started breaking their tube amps after him to do that. Yeah. But I think it's different now because, you know, you can go to Spotify and you can just hit best of country. And you can, if you spend some time with it, you can get a full history of country music just by researching it. And it used to be you had to know somebody that knew country. I think that's a blessing and a curse now because it sort of devalues the expert, the idea of an expert, which is cool because no longer do you have this barrier to access information. But the problem is there's not as much people that can really get into the nitty gritty. Like, I can go listen to country and absorb a little bit of it, but can I really get into some country? Talking about the nuance, the regions, the real like specific rhythmic grooves? Probably not.
The search for music has definitely broadened. And then I remember when I was like in high school, like the only music that you really listened to was whatever your friends were listening to. Man, people would get upset if you didn't play their favorite song. But now, you know, I'm older and I'm out. So I'm actually from Alabama. So again, also being in the South, people tend to want to just listen to the same thing. But have you ever lived anywhere else? Like, where are you from?
I was born in Jackson, but that doesn't matter. I was only there for like a year. I'm from Memphis. Grew up in Hickory Hill, went to U of M, and then I lived in New York just for 2 years to go to conservatory up there. Okay,
so how was the music in New York?
Man, it's crazy because I am a club rat. I love clubs. I like popular music, even though like I majored in jazz, like really niche like jazz music. So like very not about being popular at all. But I grew up with popular music. But it's so interesting you say that because when I got up to New York, the people I was around at conservatory and their friends was all this sort of like deep classical music, even experimental pop music. Everything was very much, and it wasn't, and I sort of lost my affinity to pop. Like there's kind of like a 2-year gap in pop music for me, like from 2009 to 2011. Like I listened to pop, but by no means the way I used to listen to it before, and by no means how much I listened to it again once I moved back. So people in different places, but it's just who you're around. You know, it's just who you're around.
That's exactly it.
And I think the people that tend to migrate to New York, the migrants, the people that like are not from New York, they tend to sort of have that more eclectic sort of vibe going on. But I I lived a little bit south of Harlem, and man, they're just listening to popular music. You go up to Washington Heights, which is where there's a large Dominican population, and they're listening to Dominican pop music. You know, they're listening to Spanish pop music. So it's still the same. It's just like if you find the people that are regionally from there, it's just like, this is just what we listen to.
So what do you think about like how stuff gets popular? So it seems like it seems like as with the me and Luis were actually talking about this. We were talking about how people get big off of like TikTok and off of like Instagram, where people are just playing music and stuff like that. And plus, like if somebody big like starts playing your music in their videos, like there was DaBaby. He had his album came out, and he had a song in there where he mentions The Rock, and The Rock is just like posting a random video like he always does, but he's playing DaBaby's music in the background, and he says shout out to DaBaby. So just like that has changed how people can get popular off of music, and compared to somebody, so like you're a local Memphis artist who you don't have the notoriety of like somebody who's signed to like Universal Studios or something like that, but you can make a big effect on the people in Memphis because you're playing local shows, you live here and stuff like that. So how do you feel like, I guess, just the way that people can get notoriety, if is it really good for music or is it bad for music?
I think it just is. I mean, you got some people, their path. Well, Lizzo said something real good about how, and Lil Nas X, actually, you brought him up. You know, we see the people that are famous all of a sudden. It's like, oh my God, Lil Nas X, overnight success. Lizzo, overnight success. But Lizzo, some of those pop songs that got super famous, like Juice, Truth Hurts, those songs were actually like 2 years old, like well over a year old before they got famous, before they blew up. And so when somebody said she had overnight success, she was like, excuse me? No, I did not have overnight success.
That's
like
funny.
I was grinding in these small clubs, these open mic nights, sleeping in my car a few times, in the studio all night, my home studio or my friend's studio, trying to get some traction. And she said she almost, she got very depressed. I think she even said like close to suicidally depressed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was super depressed because she'd been grinding on this music for years. And then all of a sudden, boom, there it is. So I think it's a cool thing. It almost, once again, it feels like how it used to be, but the scope's a lot bigger. You know, are you familiar with the movie Holiday Inn? Do you know that movie?
No, I don't.
It's this old Bing Crosby, Fred Astaire movie. And at one point, it's like the classic Hollywood movie trope. They're at the club. It's a fairly big club, and there's a promoter or AR guy there. It's like from the 40s or something. And this one woman, they hear her singing, but like no one knew who she was. And he's freaking out. He's like, I got to find her. I have to find her. She's going to be big. I got to find her. I got to find her. And then, of course, hijinks ensue, and it's this guy trying to find her and the whole deal so he can make her famous and put her in the moving pictures and all that stuff.
Okay.
So I think it's still that, but now the scope's just bigger. The bad thing about that is not only is the scope of how you'll get discovered and the tastemakers, but also the amount of music's out there.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like you have, like, Boo Mitchell's here, right? So no longer is it like if Boo Mitchell, this heavy hitter in Memphis, doesn't find out my music, there's no way I'll ever get famous. It's like the gatekeeper thing, like I have to go through Boo.
Oh,
like
yeah.
unless Boo Mitchell verifies it, nothing's gonna happen. Well, now it's not that. Now it can be, like you said, like, oh yeah, The Rock just reposted the thing. DaBaby did not know The Rock. Like, there's no way he didn't know him. But once again, now he's the sort of global thing. So Twitter blows up that whole I have to meet this one person thing. And I think that's stressful as an artist because that puts a pressure on to constantly pump out new stuff because the shelf life on a lot of music is just so low. So I think it forces people to like, I need to put something out. I need some videos, clips, something so you can stay close to the public eye.
How often do you put stuff out as far as like, I guess just singles first. Let me start with that or projects.
Man, I'm a live performer. You know, quite honestly, focusing on the studio, even with Lucky, we have 4 tracks recorded now. So we have 4 singles. We've only been a band for about a year now. Are we in our second year? I don't know. We've been playing music for a little bit now. And that's not me per se. Like the idea of dropping singles. Once again, the studio is not my favorite thing. Like,
Yeah.
For me, recording is just like less about getting famous and more like a documentation that we were here. I try not to think about being famous. So I'm actually really glad I went to music school and then had a long career on the street, School of the Streets. Because the cool thing about music school and going to music school for like classical music and especially weird conservatory modern jazz stuff is it builds inside of you, or at least it built inside of me, this assumption that I would never be famous and never really make a whole bunch of money. So my entryway into being passionate about music was into a field that has hopefully no illusions of being famous. Like playing a pop song in 11/4 or some weird time signature. Like, you're not going to get famous doing that. So for me, the recording is not really about getting famous. It's almost like a digital business card for me. It's
Gotcha.
something that if I'm 50 years old, I can be like, yeah, the band broke up, but did you hear this heat? You know, we dropped that heat for a while.
Okay.
But yeah, getting famous is nothing I ever thought about doing. So it's never been like this pressure to be famous or anything like that. I'm always just more focused on practicing, being better, and then just, you know, live shows. That's what I am.
Do you travel a good bit for performing?
No. I have before, and I have student loans for one, so it's hard to make money from touring. And when you get back, it's hard to keep gigs because you're always out on the road. So no, I don't tour a lot, and I have trouble in all areas of my life actually of being in the middle and like balance. So for me, if I were going to do the road thing, I would want to be on the road all the time. Like Lucero style road, where it's like days upon day, BB King style, right? Mostly the whole year. Or I don't want to really do it much at all.
Gotcha.
I don't like being in the in-between.
An all or nothing type person?
Yeah. But, you know, being freelance, I feel like I get I get the frequency vibe of a tour because by being freelance, I can play with anybody that's in town.
Yeah.
If somebody asks me to go on tour for like a 1 out or like a short run, I can do that because I'm freelance. And the cool thing about freelance, once again, is that I'm not tied to any one band or project. There are definitely some projects that I feel I have a strong allegiance to because ultimately you can only be in so many bands at a time, right? Because most of the shows are Friday through Sunday. So if you're in 5 bands, it's gonna be real tough to play with one. So no, I don't really travel too much, and I like being here, or I want to be on the road all the time.
Yeah. How are you communicating with people?
How do I communicate?
Yeah.
So like just let people know I'm playing and stuff like that. Oh, just social media. Yeah, just mostly, pretty much through social media. Like, I don't make flyers, but I think I'm actually about to start making flyers. I actually had Louise Page come to my day job to deliver a teaching artist workshop on social media and branding. And she really stressed the importance of thinking about the ways you interact, but then thinking about the ways you don't interact, and recognizing you have to also be on Twitter, even if you're not super into Twitter. You have to be on Facebook. You have to create these flyers, even if you're not into it.
So you went all
in.
There we go.
And eventually you probably need some physical CDs because everybody's not on the streaming thing. So I just kind of, social media is the best way, word of mouth. I don't drink anymore, honestly, and I didn't realize how helpful that was for music until I stopped drinking. Because when you become drinking buddies with somebody, even if you have nothing in common, there's a certain camaraderie there. And I definitely remember when I first got back to Memphis, I was like out at bars all the time. It was a lot easier to cultivate a fan base. Not only easier to cultivate a fan base, but to cultivate a fan base that are going to support you no matter what, even if they don't really even dig the kind of music. Because we're the drinking homies. We're the crew. We party together. We make mistakes together. We come back together. So that was actually something that took a lot of getting used to, and I had to rethink, what it meant to engage with fans. But it's been really tough in that regard because socially, one of the hardest things about drinking is like it's a huge social thing. Yeah. So once you take it out of the equation, you're not sitting at a bar and meeting 8 people in a weekend because you happen to just be at the bar. Yeah. You know what I mean?
What about collaborating with people?
Nope.
No?
Yeah, I mean, I have the band. I guess, well, technically, I'm collaborating with people all the time by being in their band.
But outside of your band, as far as collaborating with people.
Yeah, well, I'm just a participant in a lot of different bands. So, yeah, it's a collaboration, but you really have to define the relationship when you're a freelancer. You kind of have to really be clear about what the expectation is. Yeah. So I just played a gig last night downtown at the Halloran, and it was very clear that I was there to make the horn sound good. I did not have a lot of say, or really almost no say. And this is not a bad thing because as a freelancer, I understand the gig. If you're hired to do a gig, I was hired to write out the horn charts, make sure they sound good, and then that was it. And there was a music director. So, you could call that a collaboration. I added to a part of his vision, but it was ultimately his vision. Like, we didn't co-write the show. We didn't do anything like that. But to me, that's collaborative in a way.
It is.
But no, I think that what people typically associated with like, let's write together, let's collaborate together on those things. Nah, man, once again, and I don't know where that comes from, I like to kind of be, I don't mind creating the thing from top to bottom and then getting input. But very much, have you seen the new Star Wars trilogy?
I've seen, I think I saw, what was that, 7?
Okay. What about True Detective?
No.
No. Well, anyway, those two things. So the Star Wars, the new trilogy, here's what happened. There was J.J. Abrams, then there was Rian Johnson, and then there was J.J. Abrams again. Okay. So across those 3 movies, the Rian Johnson one sticks out a lot for whether you like it or not, because it's not the same creative vibe of the other 2. Like the aesthetics are kind of different, the mood's kind of different. To me personally, it doesn't fit. I kind of would have rather seen either all of it from one or all of it from the other. And I think sometimes music gets that way where if you're really just trying to do music for you, man, I would suggest just do what you want to do.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm not a collaborator. I'm not in the studio with somebody or at home with somebody writing for hours a week, anything like that. I'll write for myself and get feedback, but no, I'm not really collaborating like that.
Luis surprised me about how much. So when I listen to beats and then I pick a beat and then I make a song. Yeah. And that's just what I do. Yeah. Luis said she's written like 20 songs. Yeah. And she just has them in her phone. I was like, that's crazy. Because like for me, like if I'm listening to a beat and I write to it, let me go the opposite way. If I'm writing, that song is done. Like I will write to the song, record it, and then put it away. I don't have any songs where I'm just like currently writing to them, like editing them and stuff like that. I don't do that. So I thought that was pretty wild.
I do that.
Do you really?
Yeah. So, sometimes I'll just be walking and I'll hear a melody or I'll hear a groove. And I might just spend a little bit of time and, just write it out on some sheet music or maybe sing a little bit and record it so then I can come back and figure out the melody. And all the stuff you don't come back to, of course, but some of it you do. And, oh, man, that's perfect. Look at that segue. So the show was called Road to Memphis last night, and it's this really...
Where are you performing at?
It was last night.
No, where?
Oh, it was at the Halloran Center.
The Halloran? Okay.
Yeah, next door to the Orpheum. It's a part of that whole deal.
Okay.
And the guy that put it together made this really, really well put together tribute to Memphis, include Elvis, Johnny Cash, Stack Stuff, Aretha Franklin, Tina Turner, like really amazing tribute. And when we do Hold On, I'm Coming by Sam and Dave, he arranged it so that Love and Happiness and that song, it's timed where at the end of the video, they're talking about the song and we go into it. So to your point about collaborating, so the story of Hold On, I'm Coming, we all know the horn line. So apparently the song itself and that horn line were not written at the same time, which blew my mind. So they go in and they do the song, now don't you ever feel sad, lean on me when times are bad, that whole deal. Mm-hmm. And when they were recording it, they needed a little something else. Isaac Hayes, at some random other time, had just only written out ba-da-ba-ba-da-da. He just thought it was a fresh line. So he wrote that completely in a separate thing, no relation to Hold On, I'm Coming. And then Isaac, when they were in the studio going over Hold On, I'm Coming, he was like, hey, man, because it was David Porter was one of the collaborators. He said, man, I think I might have a horn line for this. And he goes and they were like, what is it? No phone, anything, no phone memo. So he just has to be like, what was it again? And he goes, da 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 da. And as soon as they hear it, they're like, that's it.
Yes.
So that's an example of collaboration, but also it's an example of how those little phone memos, those little throwaway things sometimes come back and it's like, maybe it's not time yet.
Yeah.
But it might come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love just thinking about different things and then just like thinking about what I could do and then being able to actually make it. It's like, dang, because the thought will be in my head and then I'll be trying to put it down. And, I'm using that. I've got the Novation keyboard over there and also have an M Audio. It's how many keys? 49. Yeah. Oxygen 49.
Yeah.
So with that one, I use you can see the white boxes up there. I use those for all my like drums. So if I'm doing like an 808 or a kick or I usually don't use my hi-hat for that, but I use just probably like 808 kick, maybe a clap. I use that for those. And then so with the keys, I'm just like, as I said, I can understand music as far as like chords and stuff like that, but I don't know it that well. Like I'm not playing piano like freaking Beethoven or anything.
Yeah.
So I'm just hitting stuff, and I'm just like, that's not what that sounded like in my head.
Yeah.
Do you ever struggle with that? Like taking something from your head and playing it, or do you, since you know music so well, is it a lot easier for you?
Parts. Yeah. I mean, I think getting the music out of your head into reality ultimately is just like it's a process. Some people it just like falls out of them, but I hear it really well, and I can figure it out pretty easily. But sometimes it's like with certain theory things, maybe you hear it, maybe you've heard it, maybe you hear it, but you just don't have that sort of like you haven't found it. So I don't have too much trouble with that. But a lot of it is I took music theory. I took a lot of music theory. Like I took AP theory in high school, so that's 1 year.
In high school, nice.
Yeah. And then all 4 years of my undergrad, I had 1 to 2 theories every semester. Mm-hmm. So we're talking 8 semesters of music theory. The master's degree I got in New York was 100% just music theory and then actually doing it. As far as that creating, it goes back to mindset. So with jazz, every time I'm improvising music, I get the same satisfaction of creating music. I mean, like, I'm improvising. I spend so much time working on that. I'm spontaneously composing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I personally feel like I'm composing all the time. But to more of a commercial music, pop music industry, more hip hop stuff, it's like, man, when are you going to put out your own original music? When are you going to do this? And it's not important to me. Actually, my bandmates, it's not as important to me. My bandmates have actually had to sort of be like, we need to record this music. We need to do this. They were like, you write these good arrangements and good originals. Why don't you want to record them? It's not like I don't want to. I just don't have that internal motivation. Like, recording music does not burn in my soul at all. And so I feel like we're recording because it is so tedious, so solitary. There's no audience vibe to it. And it really doesn't hit me hard. So I don't have any like desire to really just do it. And so that's a little tough for me. I don't it's tough for me, but still I don't see it as 100% necessary. Like I'm more focused on the live stuff, much to the annoyance of my band, I believe.
You should do a live album.
We are.
Oh, you are? There you go.
I don't know how confidential it is yet, but we booked the date. So sometime this quarter, definitely before May, I'm pretty sure, we are going to do a live recording.
A lot of people don't do that anymore. That used to be a thing for like a while, I feel like, as people were putting up. So what do you, how does that even work? Like, is it like microphones for each person?
Kind of depends on what you want to do. With horns, because a part of their instrument is the acoustics of the room. Like if you're like, this room would be really frustrating for a live performance. Yeah. Because I'm sure it's made to minimize echo and things like that. Yeah. Yeah. With a horn, you want that kind of thing. I mean, maybe that not in recording studio. Yeah, that reverb, but like natural reverb. Yeah. So like with a live recording with horns, people do it different ways. They'll probably, I imagine, they'll individually mic every single horn. I imagine that, and the bass drum and all that stuff. The bass is running DI, so that'll probably go in that way, but they might catch it on the amp too. But then they'll also probably have area mics for the horns to pick up that reverb. Okay. But the thing with the area mic is you want to set it far enough back from the other mics that you don't get this weird phasing thing where it's so close that you're getting the direct mic and the area mic and it overlaps. But what's cool when you do it that way, which is how Calvin Lauber over at Young Avenue Sound, that's how we cut our singles. Okay. And so it was cool, him and Matt Qualls, who mastered it, they were able to adjust the amount of natural room volume and individual horn volume. So we had a lot to work with. Okay. Then the mindset's a little bit different because when we play our live show with no recording, I mean, we're horns. We're not attached to anything. We walk around. We might be horns up, swinging them around, like on the floor, whatever. Live recording, you got to kind of get the arrangements and be like, this is the arrangement. you kind of got to stay in place a little bit unless you sort of work it out where you know what it's going to sound like. So yeah, there's a lot more to consider, but it's about the same. Like I said, I just try not to think about it. I'm a freelancer. That's what I do. It's all being a freelancer is mostly about performing and just being able to do it at the drop of a hat. So I try not to think about it, and that's something I notice with sometimes with musicians that are more recording studio based, which is just its own skill set. This is not a one's better than the other. But when it comes to translating it live, just because so much of it is here, but then the reverse is true, right? When I try to take what I do live and transfer it into the studio, I immediately get frustrated because I'm like, I have to do this way slower. We have to take multiple takes. You hear every little thing, so you have to go back. But then the opposite is true too, where it's like, how do you create these digital sounds sometimes? Or you had this Hoss, this badass guitar player. She came in, tore it up. Well, she's actually not available for the live gig. So what you gonna do?
Yeah.
And you gotta pay everybody.
Have you done stuff in like streets? Like, you know, you see people playing on freaking stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So you play in the streets?
Oh yeah.
Is
everywhere.
How is that beneficial for you? I mean, I know people are coming by and stuff like that, but have you seen it, I guess, propel your career any as far as like getting notoriety and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, horns are not things that people hear all the time.
Yeah.
So and not only that, people, I think the United States of America is objectively a nation that mostly has Eurocentric values. Even if it's unspoken, I think cultural norms are these unspoken things a lot of times where you don't really think about it, but when you think about African culture, Eastern European culture, more Asiatic region culture, it's not really the same values as Eurocentric things. And I think now I will say, to me, in my opinion, one of the saddest things about that is that music isn't really central to culture. Not in the way it is in other nations. You know, like, music is a part of every single moment of the day, every major ceremony, all these things. And you see that in New Orleans. You see that a little bit more. One reason is because it actually does have a lot of Haitian immigrants. There's the Creole. There's the French that were all there.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of brown-skinned people who sort of brought the vibe of music. It's in the culture. So, yeah, it definitely brings up notoriety. Do you like Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Yeah. So the way to give people more of a vibe of what I mean when I say freelance life and like playing outside, playing in these different settings is like the sellsword vibe. And like if you read the books or watch it, there are certain sellswords or certain warriors who like are the bomb.com at fighting. But you take them out the element. Like if you take a studio musician and you put them on stage, or you take a stage musician, they're used to playing concert halls, now they got to play outside.
Yeah.
It changes the vibe. So the best sellswords in Game of Thrones are the ones that have been in the most battles, all different settings. You know, you really see it. They do it more in the book with the naval warfare, where like they're constantly like, yeah, if the Greyjoys attack us from the sea, they're pretty much a done deal. They're not good at fighting on land. It's just, or it's not like they're not good. It's not their strong suit. And they always say, but you know, and a lot of characters in the books especially make the mistake. They're like, well, we'll just take them on sea. Oops. It rarely ever works out. It's the Tyrells of Highgarden that has the strongest navy. Because they're in the region near the Shield. So if you're in the Greyjoy area, the Iron Islands, you can actually sail around the western coast of Westeros near Casterly Rock, near the Lannisters. And there's a place called the Shields because they're one of the last sort of naval outposts of the Seven Kingdoms. So what the Iron Islanders would do is they'd sail far enough away from the coast, and as soon as it was time to enter Westeros, they would actually sail. So they come out of nowhere, they attack, they ruin everybody, and then once they get around there, you can actually sail into the region proper by way of wide rivers. Yeah, so as far as music is concerned, the more different settings you've played in, the easier it's going to be for you to bring it, no matter what the conditions are.
That's wild. You seem to be really into like movies and shows.
I'm a nerd. 100% a nerd. Yeah.
So what's your favorite stuff?
Marvel, Game of Thrones.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
When I was younger, it was Lord of the Rings. When I was younger, I haven't read in a while, but I used to like literally wear a gold ring I got off a bookmark with a silver chain, like in public, not ironically, like all about it. I'm reading Harry Potter I'm listening to Harry Potter for the first time, and
okay.
I was not.
Wait a minute, you didn't watch the movies?
I mean, I watched the movies, but I forgot what happened, and
okay.
and like I'm realizing why fans of Harry Potter were so upset about the movies, because my idea of what a Dementor looks like is not what they did in the movie. So I wasn't into Harry Potter for a long time. When I started reading the books, I read 1 and 2. It was a real challenge, and people had to remind me. It was like, you do know these were written for middle school children.
Yeah.
Especially the first 2. Now I'm on Prisoner of Azkaban.
Okay.
It's getting lit.
I think that was a pretty good movie.
Yeah, that was one of the better ones. But
movie.
now I'm all in. Like, love me some Harry Potter. I'm a Ravenclaw. So I'm newly nerdy about some Harry Potter.
How'd you feel about the ending of Game of Thrones?
Oh, it was trash. I kind of don't even really want to bring it up here because it's still pissing me off so bad.
How'd you feel about it? So I watched. This is how I got dragged into Game of Thrones. Okay. So my wife was watching it, and she had seen, I think at the time, so season 5, I think, was about to come out. It was 7 seasons, right?
8.
It was 8? Okay. So
they split up the last one.
Okay, so I think season 5 was done.
Yeah.
And that's when I started watching. I started at season 1 and watched. My wife was like, she's like, "You've never seen Game of Thrones?" And I was like, "No." She was like, "I'll rewatch it for you." I was like, "All right." Yeah. So we watched from 1 to 4 together. And then season 6 was coming out.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I'll skip 5 and go straight to 6. So just, save her the time of having to watch 5 all over again. So watch 6 and 7 and then 8. And I mean, obviously I like the whole thing being as in I watched all that. Yeah. But I came in late, and it was a great show and everything, but I didn't feel like I was like a fanatic. Like I loved the show. I would tell people about the show and we talk about it, but I didn't feel like I was like deep into it, wearing clothes and stuff like that of it. So when I saw the ending, I thought it was fine.
It looked really pretty. Looked pretty.
I thought it was fine. And then when I see, I'm on Twitter or Facebook and people are like devastated at the ending, telling them how crappy it was, I was like, it was that bad?
I was pretty devastated.
So what didn't you like about it?
Tonally, it was just different. Tonally, it was different. It was very obvious the writing had suffered. George, I've read the books too, the ones that are out. And so that was part of it. A lot of people, of course, come in there like, it's just a show. It's just, this is like, man, this like really got me through some time. It's like, I read all 5 of these books. It took like over a year to read all of them because they're all like 900 pages or more. Dance with Dragons, the last one that's written, is like 1,439 pages.
Oh my God.
It's extremely long. I had to develop a system of reading to even think about it. So it was like every day I was required to read 10 pages, no matter what, even if I wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
So then you could do some math. You're like, okay, if I read 10, it'll take me 140 days to finish this book. If I just read the 10. It just takes forever.
Yeah.
But what I didn't like about it is, George R. R. Martin is really good with language. Like, if you like the way he writes, he's very eloquent with his language, but it's also very literal. So it's not as much metaphor sort of thing. Because I tend to like more literal writing anyway. Like, I'm not super into, like, so clever. Like, check out how clever that person is. So when they moved beyond the books, they didn't have his writing. They didn't have the small things that build up. They didn't have that because they're not George R. R. Martin. So I've gotten to a point now, it's like they're not bad directors. It's just the material that George R. R. Martin gave them was so strong, so well thought out, so clear. And so to move beyond that, this very complex, nation-spanning story, the writing just suffered. It was super obvious. They obviously rushed things. There are entire seasons.
That's what everybody said. They rushed it.
There are seasons where you're just watching people travel. And some people hated it. As a book reader, I was like, actually, this is where most of the character development happens, is when they're just traveling. Like a huge amount of the books, it's just traveling. Just traveling or sitting at court talking about stuff. But then when you get the violence, whoa. It's like, wow, some big stuff just went down. And it's always shocking.
How'd you feel about Arya being the one to actually kill the Ice King?
It just wasn't earned. Her becoming a faceless person just wasn't earned. And when you read the book, it was like that was going to be a task. Because the way that magic works in Westeros is very subtle almost. And, you know, when you're reading the books, most people in the show don't believe magic is back until they experience it. And so when you read the chapters about the faceless men, it's very sort of nebulous what's actually happening and how she's actually moving around because she's this shadow assassin. It works really well in a book because you can just sort of leave out elements and you're like, ooh, what's going on? Problem with TV is you have to show everything.
Yeah.
And if you don't show it like you can in a book, then it's like, how do we get there?
Yeah,
and I feel like with Arya, it was exactly that. It was like, well, how do we get there? One thing that really, really drove me up the wall was the plot armor. The plot armor was so ridiculous.
What you mean?
There were certain characters that could not die.
I see what you mean.
It was, and that is not Game of Thrones. The whole point of Game of Thrones, or one of the big things, is that political intrigue, no one's safe, anything can happen. Well, you're watching these last 2 seasons, the scene with the White Walkers when they finally attack Winterfell.
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler alert for Game of Thrones.
Yeah, if you have not watched this, just stop this podcast right now.
Yeah, when they attack Hogwarts. And anyway, there were certain characters where the physics of the world were gone.
Yeah.
The sword fights, I'll take the fight between... Never mind. Anyway, the sword fights in the show at first were very methodical, very representative of medieval warfare.
Yeah.
The things at the end, people are fighting like Jedis. They're holding off the most... I mean, it was just... let's just go somewhere else.
I don't know. I felt like it was good enough for me to watch.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, there were some things I was like, that was weird.
Yeah.
Like, why'd they do that?
Yeah.
I did like that when the dragon it was an undead dragon. I was like, what are they gonna do now? That was pretty interesting. I felt like that added. Was that? Do you remember if that was in the books?
The books haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, okay.
So the last thing you see in the book, spoiler alert, is when Homeboy gets stabbed, and when Homegirl is stranded in the grass.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in season 5, I think. So that is where the books end, and then so nothing else beyond that is really written.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted what's her name to die so bad. The redhead, the queen, or redhead, not queen. Shoot, I can't think of her name.
The magic person, magic lady.
No, not her. She's not even redhead. I don't know why I said that.
Wolf lady.
She got her hair cut, and then they like shamed her because she had to walk through the city naked.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah. Miss.
Joffrey's freaking mom.
Yep. There you go.
Yeah, whatever her name is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted her to die so bad. She was part of that plot armor as you were talking about. There's just like nothing would happen that she would just die. And I was like, kill her, please, somebody.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that one scene where the mythical beast is just flying and you're like, oh, we know what's about to happen.
Yeah.
It's about to go torch the mess out of her. And then you're like, really?
Yeah.
Really?
By the way, going back to when you were talking about Star Wars and the difference between that, did you watch the Rogue One?
Oh yeah, I watched all of them. I've seen all the Star
Oh, you
Wars.
have?
Yeah.
So as I said, I think I've only seen 7. So 4, 5, 6, and then 1, 2, 3, and then when they picked back up Disney, right?
Yeah.
Disney. So when they picked back up with Disney, I've seen that one, but I haven't seen any of the rest of them.
The new trilogy.
So I think somebody said that I should watch Rogue One at a certain time frame.
Oh, if you're watching them chronologically?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're watching them chronologically, I think the way to watch them is if you really are trying to get thorough, you would watch episode 1 and 2. Then you'd start watching the cartoon, The Clone Wars. Then you'd watch Revenge of the Sith. Then you watch Rebels.
Okay.
Or not Rebels. Then you should watch, I think, Rogue One.
Was that supposed to transition the first trilogy and the second trilogy?
No, it was retroactive. So after Revenge of the Sith, Solo, the movie about Han Solo, young Han, that happens in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. And then Rogue One happens right before Episode 4, A New Hope.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then you keep going, and then I think you watch Rebels concurrently with the movies before Return of the Jedi, obviously, because that's when it culminates. And then I think there's maybe something in between as of now, I don't think there's anything. Oh, The Mandalorian. That's the newest thing that's out. So that's actually in between the original trilogy and the very newest trilogy. So if you want to watch The Mandalorian, that comes in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens.
Now, is that,
It's TV.
gosh, what is his name?
Pedro Pascal.
No, the character name.
Oh, Mando. They just call him Mando.
Oh.
Oh, it's not Boba Fett. No.
Oh, okay. That's
The
that's what-
The Mandalorian is not.
So what is
Boba Fett.
Mandalorian?
In the Star Wars universe, the Mandalorians were a race, tribe, ethnic group. I'm not as much of a nerd, I guess, compared to your average person. Never mind. So the Mandalorians were a special group of bounty hunters, warriors. They're known throughout the galaxy of being the most badass, which is why when you see Boba Fett, even Han Solo, who's cool as a cucumber, always was like, hey though, like we need to be careful around this dude. But the main thing about them, aside from being awesome, is that they have Mandalorian armor, and the code of the Mandalorians is they're never supposed to take their helmet off unless they're dead. So that's why Boba Fett, you never see his face.
Yeah.
Jango Fett, I watched the other ones recently. That was sort of weird. I don't know, but most people didn't like the prequels anyway. And Jango, they never really explored the Mandalorian piece. That's more in like the books and comics that Disney has declared lore. Other traditional features of the Mandalorians is that they usually have a grappling hook, a flamethrower, and a jetpack.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of a staple of the way they fight.
And what was special about their armor?
It's just really strong and it's really made. And,
okay.
I guess it's just like some master blacksmith stuff,
They just had like some special material that.
Yeah, maybe
didn't.
special material. The cool thing about Star Wars is they don't. So one of the problems people had with the prequels, episode 1 through 3, Phantom Menace, Clone, Sith, is that they really try to explain a lot of stuff. Whereas in the original trilogy, man, you don't know how this stuff works. Like they don't tell you.
Just believe.
Yeah, man, they don't tell you how fire is happening in space. They don't tell you what's really going on with these lightsabers.
Yeah.
The Force is just the Force.
Yeah.
They don't explain how everybody's speaking English, but the aliens understand them and vice versa.
I always wondered about that. I was wondering if they were going to explain that, but they just rolled with it and
Yeah.
expect you to believe.
Yeah, it's not about that. So then you get the prequels and they're like, the Force is midichlorians, a tiny little thing inside your body. And it's like, what? Is it really? I thought it was this mystical thing. But apparently not,
It's a great series to watch, in my opinion. I think if you like a good fiction story, just watch it. Like some people are like, I brag about not watching Star Wars. I'm like, just watch it.
Yeah.
Same thing with Game of Thrones. People are all on Twitter. I'd see people all the time bragging about not watching it. I was like, just watch it. It's great. It's a great show.
Yeah. These millions of people can't be wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like if there's that many people watching it, it's probably good. Like people would talk bad about it or just not watch it if it was actually bad.
And if you don't want to watch it, that's fine. I feel like that's the same in music though too. Like people hate some pop music and it's like, okay, that's fine, but like don't deny it. Don't try to invalidate the feelings of these millions of people who are really trying to mess with some Drake or really about some Ariana Grande. Like and then I think seeing acts like that live really can change your perspective on pop music. Like I said, I've always liked it. I've always loved pop music. Like I grew up in the Timbaland era, so Timbaland and Magoo. Don't forget about Magoo. Genuine. What was that one song I used to call into the box? You remember the box?
No.
Is that so? Once again, this is a pre-internet thing. I don't know if that was a national thing or just a regional thing.
So you're 32?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm 27.
Okay. Yeah.
Which sometimes that can be like even people. So my wife is 2 years younger than me, and there are things that I remember that she doesn't remember. I'm just like, that's just 2 years.
Yeah. So the box was this channel. It was a TV channel, and you call in, and there's a code for music. There's a code for a lot of popular music.
Okay.
So what you would do, you would call. It was I think 99 cents or something, and you then get the song played on the box. And so it could be a thing where a song's so popular, you might see the same video like 5 times in a row. And it just made me think about Love to Love You. Love to love to love ya, love ya, love ya. Ooh, it's a really great video. Are you ready for the amount of people in this? This was like that was the original all-star cast for me of modern pop music. But I think it was Aaliyah, Missy Elliott, Genuine, Timbaland, and Magoo. One song. Maybe Aaliyah wasn't in it, but all one track, So it was amazing.
That actually reminds me. I feel like that used to be a thing back in the day.
The super groups?
I would say probably, late 90s, early 2000s. They used to just pack in people. And it was like they were trying to make sure that everybody got something. I felt like there was more togetherness back then. And nowadays, which people do collabs nowadays, but I feel like they do it more for money. Like, I think they're doing, who was that? Post Malone did a random song with somebody, and I was like, that was random. Yeah. But I feel like that was for, the money and to, this song is going to blow up if you two people are on the song. Yeah. But back then, I feel like they genuinely appreciated each other's music, and they're like, hey, let's get a group together or something like that. And gosh, who was it? I think it was, Busta Rhymes. Busta Rhymes had a song, Touch It. That Touch It song had probably 6 or 7 New York rappers on there. It was what's that? Rashida something. That female rapper, and then there was a Lil Kim, I think, was on there.
Yeah.
Papoose. I can't remember who else is on there. But there was a ton of people on that song, and I was like, God dang! But I feel like that's what they used to do back then.
Yeah, I think the James Bond movies have always especially the James Bond movies, where they definitely take who's hot at the moment. Mm-hmm. I mean, even all the way back to James Bond #1, which was Dr. No, I think was the
sure.
I think that might have been the first movie. I can't remember, but anyway, they always took the hottest artists at the time and were like, I think this year, which I'm very excited about, Billie Eilish is going to do the Bond song.
Really?
Yeah, she's going to be the Bond song. Adele did one. Paul McCartney. That song, ba-na-na, da-na-na, da-na, da-na-na, da-na-na, that Wing song, that's from a James Bond movie.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe. I don't know. But they did a James Bond song. So it's always some super popular artist.
That's another thing. Getting your music into a movie.
Yeah.
I would love to do that. And I bought this, what was it? The collector's edition of this Native Instruments thing. And Complete 12, that's what it's called. And they have so many things that are great for movies and whatnot. Mm-hmm. I love it. They have a preset called Thrill.
Okay.
And it's really scary movie, type that shrilling sound. I'm like, man, I can imagine just watching the video of a film and then just having to think what do I put right here?
I have to do that, actually. For the first time, I'm going to have to do that.
Really?
Yeah,
what are you doing it for?
Stress me out a little bit. It's going to... Oh, I actually can't talk about it. Never mind.
Fine.
I just remembered that it's not... It hasn't
So, okay, what are you, a part of, if that makes sense? Without giving away?
I'm recently decided to take the plunge in and start maybe putting original audio to video.
Okay.
And so I'm starting to explore that, starting to research how it happens, asking friends about it, but I'm about to dive into that world.
Okay.
So just really trying to find my way. I think I'll probably go towards more of a serial music approach. Part of my master's degree and the later part of my theory in undergrad was a lot around serial, atonal, extended harmony techniques. Which is super fun to me. It's very 100% nerdy, out of nowhere. But I like the sense of dread and anxiety and fear it can put out. So I think I'm gonna go that route with it and just explore that because I haven't explored it in a long time. That I haven't explored I guess what you could call highbrow music in a long time. You know what I mean? So I'm ready to dive back into that. And I have, what's cool about horror movies. So you know how when there's about to be the scare moment, the jump scare or whatever, or they're trying to build up that dread?
Yeah.
So it turns out one of the major techniques for them to do that is they actually, in the audio of the track, they pump in super ultra low frequencies that you can't hear really.
Really?
Yeah, so you can't hear them, but it's this real ultra low bass, and it's just there enough that even unconsciously you feel it.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's this unsettling thing that's you can't really audibly hear it, but it's there.
That's crazy.
Actually, for a lot of horror movies, check it out. So, we're talking about Bela Bartok. If memory serves correct, he's the composer for The Shining.
Okay. Yeah.
So Bartok, if you remember that music, he uses sort of the sounds that I like when it comes to more classical music, like not 100% like Bach, just like 1, 3, 5 stuff like that, but like really extended techniques, some weird chromatic sound and stuff. But yeah, so that the music I even like is more geared towards like horror movies and things like that.
Really? Okay.
Another super interesting one. So whoever did the Man of Steel soundtrack, it was either, I don't think it was John Williams. It might have been Michael Giannocchio who did Cloverfield.
Giannocchio?
Yeah.
What kind of name is that?
French, I guess.
French?
I don't, or excuse me, Italian, I think.
Okay.
But I'm not sure, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. But it's dude named Mike. And for the Man of Steel soundtrack, have you heard that soundtrack?
I haven't.
Yeah, so it's really big, and it has this really big sort of drum thing. Like drums are a major part of it. So what he did was he actually brought in like 8 different drummers, and he gave them the music and had them play at the same time, but interpret it how they wanted to. So they got to build their own drum set.
Very loosely.
Yeah, so like some drummers I'm sure use like low toms, some people use more snare stuff, but he had them all played at the same time and then took the audio from all of their different things to make the sound. Chernobyl on HBO, which is kind of like a true life horror story.
I've yet to see that, but I've heard it's amazing.
I watched the first 2 or 3 episodes, and I had to put it away for a second. It's really scary. It's super depressing because first of all, you already know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's happening. But the composer, who she may have won a Golden Globe, I can't remember, but what she did was super cool. So for Chernobyl, she actually captured the sounds from nuclear reactors. Yeah, so Chernobyl, of course, is this nuclear meltdown. Yeah. So what she did was she actually recorded the various sounds that you would hear, like all the mechanical sounds, all the ambient noise, the white noise. She recorded that and created her score based on that. So I'm pretty sure all the musical sounds or the ambient music that's happening is true nuclear reactor sounds.
That's
that
crazy.
I think she manipulated somehow. So once again, man, technology just allowing folks to do some wild stuff. Super low frequencies, Interstellar. What he did, the first time I saw it, I thought something was wrong with my ears. First time I saw Interstellar. No, what he actually did was that organ. When that organ comes in during Interstellar, he went into the mix. Christopher Nolan talked to the audio engineers. He actually made that quite a bit louder than everything else. So when the organ comes in, it's louder because that's kind of his space theme. Yeah. So in order to convey the sort of like magnitude of space, he amped up the organ a lot. Okay. Yeah. So many audio techniques,
Yeah. I think it's interesting just being able to take sounds and like how some people like widen them and then you can use like reverb, as we were talking about earlier with the mics and stuff like that, being able to widen sounds. And some people like to take out the low end and bring up the high end or do a high pass cut, whatever you like to do. It's interesting how people will take their perspective on what they think something should sound like. Yeah. And okay, I'm not advocating for you to, hey, you need to start doing studio stuff, but being in the studio, so I've got a friend in Louisiana, or actually he's in Dallas now, but so the first time we ever met, I actually met him from Full Sail University. We had classes together, and so the first time we ever met in person, I drove down to Louisiana, met him, and then just being together for the first time, it was so different than like, hey, I just sent you my vocals for that. Hey, I just sent you this beat, and getting someone else's perspective of like, even if you're writing lyrics, like, hey man, does this sound good? And then you're just like telling them your lyrics and stuff like that. Just being able to hear different stuff from somebody else. So, I produce my stuff. I engineer my own stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So being able, I put in time.
Putting in the work.
Yeah. So being able to like, I'll come up with a finished product and then I'll send it to somebody and they'll be like, hey, could you add this? I'm like, why? Because I feel like to me it sounds fine, but to them they've got a different perspective. Like they want to hear something else. Yeah. I'm like, that's so weird. We can listen to the same thing, but think differently about how it quote unquote should sound.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean that's just true. I mean I guess that gets back to the part of like some artists are just like, you have to do it and just put it away.
Yeah.
You have to just do it and put it away, which is another, you know, when you started talking about how you sit in the studio and talk with somebody and you nitpick over things or like talk about that, I got anxiety just by hearing it because I'm so live music oriented. And what I love, like,
God.
so this show, I talked to my, you know, when my students get nervous, I was like,
no,
I don't want to
no.
do that. Yeah. I'm the person like, it sounds fine. Sounds good. Let's just roll with it. Sounds good. You know,
That's so crazy.
But I was talking with my students. One of the things I love about live music is that the way I try to get out of my head about it is in rehearsal, I'll probably be more up in my head. But for the performance, I actually feel sometimes it's a different kind of edge. But when you're live, you only have to play every note one time.
Yeah.
And for me, when I go in with that mindset, like as soon as you play the notes, you're like, I'm done with that note. I hit that note. I don't have to worry about that note ever again. We're moving on live and it's done. You hit that last note, you hit the last note.
That's
recording.
crazy.
Even what makes me mad about recording too is even if you play it the way it's supposed to be, oh, hey man, actually I forgot to record that. Or, oh, hey man, actually, even though you played that whole excerpt, turns out like you're a little too close to the mic. We set you up a little different, not even your fault. Just scoot back a little bit. And you're like, man, I just played all those notes. Now I got to play all these notes again.
Yeah.
So the studio, I'm probably the most low key as well though.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, whatever you need. You know, okay, you need another take. That's fine. Let's do it. You know, they pay studio time professionally. I put up a Facebook post about older musicians shepherding the younger musicians, and this one guy came up. You know, I could tell it kind of like triggered him a little bit.
Yeah.
But everything he said in his reply was totally true about showing up on time, doing this, coming in ready to go. And the studio is an example where when you go into the studio, it used to cost per minute. You know, so any minute that you're spending in the studio is more money.
That's crazy.
So
That's expensive.
It is expensive. So you got the guys you got the team, you got the women, you got the guys that can just do it once, and it was right.
Yeah.
You know, and that still exists.
That's how you get good.
Yeah, that's how you get good, and that still exists. The problem, though, and this is what this really great trombonist, who's done so much, real nice guy, and in real life, if you read the post and didn't know him, you'd be like, this guy. But I know him, and like all of it came from love or whatever. But there used to just be more work. So the field itself, it was more, of course, it was more live music oriented. So the customs of professionalism and how to do certain things, more musicians knew them because there was more work. There was a union, there were rules and standards, and there was a lot of unspoken code. But that's changed now, you know, because it's just not as widespread, you know. So people got to hold on to their work. You know, it's like, no, I got my studio gig. I'm not going to share this gig. This is my livelihood.
Yeah.
As opposed to, yeah, I got my studio gig. You got your studio gigs. We all got studio gigs.
Yeah.
It's not a thing anymore.
That's awesome. Well, man, it's been great talking to you. Please tell everybody like where you start performing at, like or where all you perform at, and like when do you usually perform?
Yeah, so I freelance with a lot of different bands. The two bands I play with the most as of right now are the Lucky 7 Brass Band and the Obruni Dance Band, which is a West African dance music band. So like a lot of African high life music, you know, the African pop music. We got the Lucky 7 has a single out called Bring It. It's on, I think, everything, Apple Music, Spotify. I'm a Spotify pusher, so
okay.
But it's out. Bring it. People like it. It's intense, so check that out. I play a lot at Rail Garden, actually. I play a lot at Rail Garden. I'm playing at DKDC tonight, though.
Okay.
Lucky 7 starts like at 10:30 or whatever. So yeah, those are kind of my usual suspect venues: DKDC, Rail Garden, Lafayette's. But once again, freelance, wherever you want me. Like if we're storming the castle and there's a dragon, that's fine. Let's just go. I'm ready.
Awesome. Well, it's been great to have you on, and
Thank you.
Might have you on another time, man, for real.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks for everybody tuning in, and see you next time. Hey, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the podcast. And if you would, hit the subscribe button. The subscribe button allows you to, well, subscribe to the podcast. And if you give me a like and give me a comment, well, that would help out as well. Commenting allows you to have a conversation with me, and liking it allows me to know that you actually like it. And if you dislike it, hit the dislike button twice. That's a real help out for me. So, comment, like, subscribe, and let's keep it rolling.